Prynawn da, a chyfarchion dydd Gwyl Dewi chi. Heddi fel sy'n draddodiadol, yn ni'n dathlu beth mae'n olygu I fod yn Gymru. A dathlu ein Cymreictod yn ei holl amrywiaeth. Ac mae'n iaith ni yn rhan pwysig o'n hanes a'n hunaniaeth ni p'un ydyn ni'n siarad Cymraeg a'i peidio. Mae'r Gymraeg yn perthyn I ni gyd. A felly heddi, rwy am drafod yn taith at filiwn o siaradwyr Cymraeg erbyn 2050, y camau I ni'n ei cymryd mwyn cyflawni hynny, a chyhoeddi mwy o fuddsoddiad I dyfu'r iaith ymhlith pobl ifanc. Today we traditionally celebrate what being Welsh means to us and celebrating our Welshness in all its diversity. And our language is an integral part of our history and identity, whether we speak it or not. Welsh belongs to us all. And so I want to reflect on our journey to 1 million Welsh speakers by 2050, the steps we're taking to achieve this, and to announce more investment to grow the language among our young people. First, I want to consider where we are today. We know that 86% of adults in Wales agree that the language is something to be proud of. We've got more adults learning Welsh than ever before. There's a whole host of Welsh language services available alongside S4C, and Welsh has made its mark in the digital world. And we also know that this government has set an unprecedented and groundbreaking ambition to reach 1 million Welsh speakers by 2050. This has all happened after Saunders Lewis' famous Cynhadledd iaith speech, a radical wake-up call on the fate of the language, when he warned that after the beginning of the 21st century, it would cease to exist as a living language. Well, we can be proud as a nation that this is not where we are. Our language is strong and our ambitions even stronger. And despite the challenges that we still face, we are determined to see our language flourish. You'll have seen the announcement that we'll be giving everyone the opportunity to reach their potential and learn the language free of charge up to the age of 25. I hope that we'll be giving many people another chance so that thousands of our young people can become confident bilingual citizens. I've said publicly before that we plan to introduce a 10-year workforce plan to ensure that we have the teachers that we need to increase Welsh medium education in our schools. And in addition, from this September, we'll be providing free Welsh lessons to the education workforce, teachers or teaching assistants, so that more people in the sector can speak some Welsh to help our schools along the path towards more Welsh language provision over time. Our language belongs to us all. And I've been very clear that everything I do as Minister for the Welsh Language is going to be based on increasing the use of our language. Our Cymraeg 2050 strategy has two main aims. The first is the well-publicised aim to reach 1 million Welsh speakers. But the second is equally crucial, doubling daily use of the language. And in the last few months alone, I've announced £600,000 for the National Eisteddfod towards hosting the event this year in Tregaron, as we look to bring the festival to a new audience. £500,000 to provide free entry to the Eisteddfod in Denbigh in its centenary year. Funding for online taster courses for refugees and asylum seekers to learn Welsh without needing first to be fluent in English. And we've also supported Mudiad Meithrin with £190,000 for work, including their Camwrth Gam school scheme, which gives young people the skills, qualifications and work experience to start a career in the Welsh medium childcare sector. And today I'm pleased to name 11 projects that will now be able to apply for funding from the Welsh Medium Capital Grant, totalling over £30 million. Here's a taste of what's been proposed. £5.6 million to build a brand new Welsh medium primary school with capacity for 150 full-time pupils in the Buckley or Mynydd Isa area in Flintshire, plus Welsh language immersion activities and adult learning to support the Welsh medium startup provision. £4.4 million to create a dedicated Welsh language immersion centre and capacity for 228 additional pupil places at Ysgol Ystrade in Llanelli. over £3 million in Gwynedd to increase the capacity of 3 schools in communities with more than 70% Welsh speakers, and to fund the second phase of a project to expand the capacity and relocate language centres in the county. And in addition to this investment in Welsh medium education, I'm also announcing an additional £1.2 million for the new financial year to support the Urdd's recovery from the pandemic and to support the organisation to continue its activities which have been disrupted by COVID-19. The Urdd does fantastic work in creating opportunities for young people to use Welsh outside of the classroom, and this funding will support a network of Urdd development officers across Wales, as well as new support for Welsh medium apprenticeships within Wales' most deprived communities. Widening access to Welsh medium education and creating opportunities to use Welsh outside the classroom will open the door to a new world, to new friends, to new opportunities, and a unique culture for so many young people. We've come so far, and we know there's a long way to go. But with our shared determination, we will see our Welsh language grow ever stronger. Dydd Gwyl Dewi, hapus I bawb. A na I droi yn gyntaf at Bethan Lewis, BBC Wales.
Anda a Dydd Gwyl Dewi hapus. Could I ask you first of all about the latest on COVID measures in schools? From this week, schools supported by councils will decide the level of COVID measures within their schools based on local risk. At a minimum, that will still include masks in corridors and outside classrooms. When will that measure and other COVID measures in schools be dropped altogether?
Wel, diolch Bethan am y cwestiwn. Mae'n gwestiwn pwysig. Ni ar y siwrne, wrth gwrs, wrth bod ni'n llacio'r cyfyngiadau sydd yn cymdeithas ni'n gyffredinol I wneud hynny hefyd yn ysgolion ni. We're on that journey across society, aren't we, of lifting some of the restrictions which we've been living with for some time, and that will apply in schools as it does more broadly across society. As of this week, the start of the new half-term, schools will now be operating on the local control framework, which enables schools to vary their measures in schools to reflect the local circumstances of that school, and they'll reach that decision in discussions with their local public health and local education authority officials. For the time being, we're requiring schools generally, at least to be asking staff and secondary learners to wear face masks in communal areas, but not in classrooms. And I plan to keep that under very active review. But as you will know, coming back from a half-term break, we need to keep an eye on the figures. In the period before the half-term, they were coming down, and we hope and expect that will continue. And so I'll be keeping those measures under active weekly review. But the flexibility now we've provided to schools to operate on that framework will enable schools to reflect their local circumstances much more closely than they've been able to.
Sorry, I'm obviously ofyn I chi ateb hwnna'n Gymraeg cyn I fi ofyn yr ail gwestiwn.
Wel, jyst I ddweud, bod ni gyd ar y llwybr tuag at codi'r cyfyngiadau ni wedi bod yn byw gyda nhw yn ein cymdeithas yn gyffredinol, a mae hynny'n wir yn ein hysgolion ni, fel mae yn fwy eang. Ar gyfer yr hanner tymor sy'n newydd ddechrau, ni wedi gofyn I ysgolion fynd nôl ar y fframwaith leol o ran penderfyniadau ar y mesurau sydd yn digwydd yn yr ysgol. Felly mae gan ysgolion ar y cyd gyda'i hawdurdodau lleol a'i cynghorwyr iechyd cyhoeddus, gyfle I adlewyrchu'r amgylchiadau lleol yn y camau maen nhw'n cymryd yr ysgol. Felly bydd rhai ar bob rhan o'r ystod o fesurau sydd ar gael I ysgolion. Ar hyn o bryd, rwy wedi gofyn I bob ysgol barhau I sicrhau bod oedolion a dysgwyr ysgol uwchradd yn parhau I wisgo gorchuddion wyneb mewn mannau cyffredinol, ond ddim yn yr ystafell ddosbarth. Byddwn ni'n cadw hwnna dan trosolwg parhaus, ac yn sicr yn eisiau codi'r mesur hwnnw pan fydde'n addas I wneud hynny. Ond ar ôl yr hanner tymor, mae'n bwysig bod ni dal yn cadw llygad ar y ffigurau. Cyn yr hanner tymor, roedden nhw'n dod lawr, ni'n disgwyl ac yn gobeithio bydd hynny'n parhau, ond ni'n cadw hyn dan drosolwg wythnosol ar hyn o bryd.
Diolch, and if you could answer the second question in Welsh and English too, please. The world's attention is obviously on events in Ukraine at the moment. Many children and young people will be feeling anxious about what they're seeing and hearing about, and that's on top of 2 years of anxiety for some because of COVID as well. What can you as Education Minister do to support schools as they try to address some of these concerns that young people will have?
Well, I think, in a way, nothing characterises the spirit of the people of Wales and the young people of Wales on this, our National Day, more than the outpouring of support that we've seen for the people of Ukraine. And we stand with the Ukrainian people who are bravely facing the assault from Russian forces. The First Minister will be making a statement further to this in the Chamber later on today about particular measures that we will be taking as a government. But I know that schools across Wales will want to take the opportunity of reflecting with their young people on what's happening in the Ukraine. We want our young people in Wales to be engaged citizens of the world and to reflect that compassion and internationalism that we know motivates our young people and our school system. And I know that across Wales today, our young people will be thinking of that on this, our National Day. Dwi ddim yn credu bod lot o bethau yn fwy nodweddiadol o'r agwedd gyda ni yng Nghymru a gyda'n pobl ifanc ni ar ein diwrnod cenedlaethol na'r cydymdeimlad a'r gefnogaeth sydd wedi dod allan o pob cwr o'n gwlad ni i bobl Wcrain yn ei amgylchiadau nhw ar hyn o bryd. Maen nhw'n sefyll ac yn gwrthwynebu ymosodiad gan fyddin Rwsia yn ei herbyn nhw ac ni fel Llywodraeth a ni fel cenedl yn sefyll gyda nhw yn hynny o beth. Ac rwy'n gwybod ar draws yn ysgolion ni yng Nghymru bydd pobl ifanc a staff yn edrych ar yr hyn sy'n digwydd yn Ukraine. Ac rwy'n gwybod bydden nhw eisiau hefyd adlewyrchu ar hynna. Ni eisiau ein pobl ifanc ni fod yn bobl sydd yn edrych yn ryngwladol ac yn teimlo undod gyda chenedloedd eraill. Ac rwy'n sicr bydd hyn yn destun trafod yn yr ysgolion ni ar heddi yn diwrnod cenedlaethol ni. Adrian Masters, ITV Wales.
Thank you, Minister. Could you say more about the kind of measures that are being considered, the concrete steps that are being considered to help the people of Ukraine, and would that include taking a number of Ukrainian refugees?
Diolch, Adrian, am y cwestiwn hwnnw. Yes, as I say, the First Minister will provide further details of this later on today, but the measures which the Welsh Government is proposing include a financial and humanitarian aid package to the Ukraine, which will provide support for those in desperate need. And we are discussing at the moment how best to make sure that package of support is most effectively deployed to support their needs. Also looking at what contribution we as a government can make in relation to surplus medical equipment. We know that that's been a need which some in Ukraine have called for. We're looking at what we can do in that space. As you will know, the First Minister has made very clear our ongoing commitment as a nation of sanctuary, that we stand ready to welcome people who need to leave Ukraine at this time. And the First Minister has also written to the Prime Minister to urge the UK government, if you like, to go further and faster. We welcome the measures taken already, but we would urge them to go further and faster on that route. And to strengthen the current arrangements in place for Ukrainian citizens to be able to come to the UK. We as a government are talking to the Welsh Local Government Association and our colleagues in local government about how we can work together to support those who might be arriving in Wales as a consequence of what's unfolding in the Ukraine.
Thank you. Can you say what you make of the Welsh Conservative call for a St David's Day holiday? I know the Welsh Government's position on this, but as part of what the Welsh Conservatives are saying, they've criticised your government for not lobbying successfully enough for it.
Well, we've had a long-standing campaign, as you know, as a Welsh Government, to seek the devolution of powers to Wales so that we can declare St David's Day what it should be, which is a national holiday for us all to celebrate our national identity with a bank holiday. And I'm personally delighted that the Welsh Conservatives are prepared to lend their support to that campaign. I think what we want to see is an opportunity for Wales to celebrate its National Day with a bank holiday, and for us all to come together to reflect on our pride as a nation, and I'm very pleased the Welsh Conservatives are of that view as well. Abi Wittick, Wales Online.
Thank you, Minister. You mentioned earlier that obviously schools have gone back this week after half term, still on that local framework to keep measures ramped up and down depending on local circumstances. Is it your feeling that that framework will be needed into next term and possibly beyond?
Well, Abi, as I say, we keep these matters under regular review, really, and I think the move onto the framework, if you like, is a move into a space where we recognise that the situation in society at large and in our schools is improving from a COVID point of view, obviously. I think what the framework does provide is a very wide range of approaches which are available to schools and available really at very short notice to respond to changes. So I would hope and expect to see that schools over time move to the lower end of the interventions and the measures available in that framework. But there'll be an ongoing need for schools and indeed all parts of society to continue having regard to their kind of local risk profiles. And I think what the framework provides is a readily available tool to be able to respond in a proportionate way to changing circumstances.
So there's no plan to stand that down at a certain point?
Well, we will want to make sure that schools are operating at the most proportionate level of intervention. And as I say, I expect that over time to become at the kind of low level of intervention. And we'll just keep under review whether the framework remains a useful tool in all circumstances. But the great merit of it is that it is very flexible and allows schools to respond, very nimbly, if you like, to changing circumstances.
Thank you. Moving on to sort of another matter, is also associated with the pandemic. There have been repeated warnings of the mental health effects of the pandemic on children's learning and their mental health. Schools say that learning and well-being is their priority. Are you confident that the funding and mechanism is in place to provide children and teenagers with the CAMS support they need? School leaders are constantly telling us there are long waiting lists for CAMS. The NHS is saying the same. Are you confident that that help is there for children and young people in schools and colleges? And if not, what are you doing about that?
Well, that's a very important question. I absolutely recognise the scale of the challenge. You will know probably that I've been working with my colleague Lynn Neagle in government. We co-chair a delivery group which looks at the implementation in our school system of the whole school approach to mental health and well-being. And from the next financial year onwards, the budget in support of that will be significantly increased in each of the next 3 years. So that will provide additional resources into our schools to make sure that the kind of targeted but also universal support which students and staff need is available, that there's training available for the education workforce at large, that the counselling provision in schools is extended, and that the rollout of the in-school CAMS activity that we've been piloting is able to be spread throughout our school system. So there's absolutely a commitment on our part as a government to ensure those services become more widely available and increased funding to do that. And in addition to that, as you will know, Abby, over the last 2 years, we provided significant sums into the school system to support with pupil wellbeing in particular. You'll also know that from the next financial year onwards, that funding won't be available in terms of the settlement that we get from the UK government as a consequence of the Barnett formula. But I have found in my budget funding to enable some of that to continue in each of the next 3 years, because I think it's absolutely vital that we continue to provide that support for our pupils' mental health and well-being. And I'm conscious as well, as we approach the period when examinations are coming, that there will be some learners who are particularly anxious about that. And so today we're also launching a communications campaign to remind students and pupils of the support available for them in terms of preparing for their examinations and assessment, because I'm conscious that's another source of anxiety for some students, and I hope that that communications campaign will make it easier for them to find some of the support that's available to them. Thomas Davis o Global Ysgolwch yn Dda.
Good afternoon, Minister. Regarding the 1 million by 2050, many people from Wales obviously live outside of Wales. Does the Welsh Government want to eventually extend their 1 million by 2050 out to places outside of Wales where Welsh history and Welsh culture is somewhat significant, in places like Cheshire, Shropshire, even Liverpool, even London?
Well, it's a very good question, and we are very proud of our Welsh language in Wales, but also in terms of our profile both in other parts of the UK and across the world. And we think it's a really important part of the way in which we engage with other countries, actually, to celebrate our bilingualism, which in most countries in the world is actually a reason, pretty normal state of affairs. So we're very proud of that as part of our international engagement. In terms of the availability of Welsh language teaching, actually there are lots of examples of people, both in other parts of the UK and indeed internationally, which are taking advantage of some of the courses available by the Ganolfan Dysgu Genedlaethol, for example, and are learning Welsh because they themselves have a connection with the nation. Maybe they themselves are Welsh and share our pride in the language and have decided they want to make sometimes the first steps towards learning it, and we would encourage them to do that. As I say, the Welsh language belongs to us all. Felly, Thomas, o'ch chi'n gofyn ynglyn â beth yw cyrhaeddiad yn uchelgais ni ar gyfer y Gymraeg, a mae'n sicr bod yn hunaniaeth ni fel cenedl ddwyieithog yn un o'r pethau ni'n falch iawn ohono fe wrth bod ni'n ymwneud gyda gwledydd eraill ym Mhryden a thu hwnt. Mae llawer iawn o enghreifftiau o bobl yn Lloegr, yn yr Alban, yn Iwerddon a thu hwnt sydd eisoes yn manteisio ar wersi ar-lein enghraifft gan y Ganolfan Dysgu Genedlaethol, a mae hynny'n grêt. Ni'n annog unrhyw un sydd â cysylltiad neu diddordeb gyda'r Gymraeg neu gyda Chymru, os gyda nhw ddiddordeb yn dysgu'r iaith, ni'n hannog nhw i wneud hynny. Fel wy'n dweud, mae'r Gymraeg yn perthyn i bob un ohono ni.
Diolch yn fawr. A'r cwestiwn ola. Wrexham FC's promotion of the Welsh language over the last year since the Hollywood takeover has been significant, with at least one half of the co-chairman learning a bit of Welsh himself, singing a couple of verses of the anthem. How important is it, or how can the Welsh Government really harness opportunities like these to help grow the language?
Well, I think it's a really very good example, Thomas, of the kind of innovative and creative ways which people are discovering for themselves, of sharing their pride and their joy in the Welsh language, even if they themselves don't speak very much of it. Most people in Wales will be able to say a word or two at the very least. And, my encouragement to everybody who has any amount of Welsh is just to use as much of it as you can, day by day, learn a few more words, put yourself on that path of learning more and more Welsh. There's a great welcome for you if you choose to do that. A large community of Welsh speakers who are ready to support and embrace you on that journey. I think what Ryan and Rob are doing in Wrexham is a very good example of how individuals can lead the way in that. Felly, jyst eisiau llangyfarch Ryan a Rob yn Wrexham am y ffordd greadigol ac arloesol maen nhw wedi defnyddio i ledaenu'r neges am y Gymraeg. Fy neges I fel gweinidog I unrhyw un yng Nghymru. Mae rhan fwyaf bobl yng Nghymru falle'n gallu dweud o leia gair neu ddau yn y Gymraeg llawer mwy mewn amryw enghreifftiau. A'r hyn wy'n annog pawb yw defnyddio'r Gymraeg sydd gyda nhw, faint bynnag yw e. Jyst defnyddiwch eiriau bob dydd os gallwch chi ychwanegwch at hynny yn ddyddiol. Os ych chi ar y llwybr I ddysgu'r iaith, mae croeso mawr I chi. Mae cymuned o siaradwyr sydd yn mynd I fod yn gefnogol iawn ohonoch chi. Felly cofiwch bod y Gymraeg yn perthyn I bob un ohono ni. Diolch yn fawr.